Well, thank you for joining us tonight. As you can see, we're doing something different tonight. So if you've had a chance to come to Sunday morning, we know we do an equipping service at Saturdays typically and Sunday at 8:50. And at 10, 11, 10, we have an exploring service for friends who are kicking the tires. We've brought that experience here tonight because we have a very special, not only guest speaker, but theme we want to look at. And that theme might be something you want to invite your friends to hear even tomorrow, as our speaker's going to be with us tomorrow at 11:10 and 8:50 as well, doing the exact same presentation you're going to hear tonight if one of your friends is interested. That last song was about dreams. Dreams drive us. Dreams fuel us. Dreams motivate us. We had dreams for our marriage before we got married. We had dreams for our family and our kids and what their careers might be, what their life might be. We had dreams for our careers and what we might accomplish. I remember some of the great dreams I had as a kid. See, as a kid, I remember having an idea of how I could use technologies and computer to create unforgettable experiences. Now, back then it was the Atari, granted. I loved playing with computers, but I had an idea of how a new type of experience could be created. I had a dream of something. So I got an old Commodore 64. I became a computer programmer. I wrote my own video games. Yet at the same time, I was surrounded with a community of faith and friends. We used to make our own home videos. Now, I often wondered if you could take video production and technology and create experiences. I was also impacted by my grandfather. This is Bob. Bob was an entrepreneur, a Marine, an electrical engineer. He once took a decoy duck when he started his brokerage fund, a brokerage real estate company, and he turned it into an electrical boat that he could chase ducks around at his lake house. I was also impacted by my Grandpa Larry. Explains why I'm losing my hair. Thank you, Grandpa Larry. That's Grandpa at 51. He died when I was in 6th grade, and one of the first times I learned how to grieve. He used to have these cough drops he would pass out whenever we pretended we had a cough. But he was an incredible hard worker and man of faith. Bob and Larry impacted me a lot. I headed to Chicago for college, still with these dreams of creating some type of experience that brought faith and fun together. There I was, being a rebel. I came across a video toaster, a brand new nonlinear video editing system when I was in college, which, believe it or not, was built on an old Commodore 64 platform. I was sitting in this studio bringing my love for faith and video production together and learning a brand new 3D animation software called Lightwave. And somebody walked into this video studio and handed me a demo copy of something called VeggieTales. And I was immediately struck by the creativity of it, the innovation of it, all the dreams I had of taking video and technology and putting it together, and the names of the two characters were my two grandpas, Bob and Larry. And this man who voiced Bob and came to create this product that sold to date over 60 million copies and units, was in 1 out of every 3 households in America, is with us today, Phil Vischer, to share his story about how he dreamed, led, lost, and learned from the death of his experience and dream with VeggieTales. He inspired my dad to create a Bob and Larry lawn chair for my daughter when she was 2 years old because of her love for the lessons she found there. So if you're not familiar with VeggieTales, or the great work that Phil's done since then with Buck Denver and What's in the Bible and the Jellyfish Labs, I want to give you just a taste. As the video comes to an end, if we could give a warm welcome to Phil after we watch this. Let's watch.
Mother, can you push play?
With Buck Denver.
Genesis begins it all.
I took a bus from Texas just to sing a song about Exodus.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers.
Read a little every day before you slumber.
Cap it all off with a trip through Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy. What do we mean when we say the Bible is true and trustworthy? What's the difference between smart and wise?
That's a great question.
And the Saul became jealous. He was filled with envy and hatred. Yes, King Saul turned to the dark side.
39 kings for Israel and Judah. 39 kings, mostly nasty, mean, and rude.
3 saw the
prophets. There ain't none finer. They're in two sections called the major and the minor. There will be no hunger. Bam! He feeds 5,000 people just like that. There will be no sickness. Boom! He heals people, the crippled, the blind. Whatever is broken about us is fixed the way it was supposed to be.
The word Pauline means of Paul.
And epistle?
Epistle is a Greek word that means letter.
We'll say it for the sixth time.
Or seventh or eighth.
We're justified by grace through faith.
You got that right.
Hey there! I felt like my whole life just flashed before my eyes. That was like 25 years of work in 2 minutes.
Hi, kids. I'm Bob the Tomato.
Or perhaps you know me better as the somewhat uptight British asparagus.
Or maybe you'll know me as a cantankerous decorative gourd.
Or perhaps you know me best as the voice that says,
And now it's time for Silly Songs with Larry, the part of the show where Larry comes out and sings a silly song. Thank you very much.
that was my, the silly song announcer. It was my impression of a British golf announcer. That was the idea behind him.
He's approaching the fourth green.
That sort of feel. Seemed like it hadn't been done enough in Christian children's entertainment. I have Ohio connections. I just have to, I live outside Chicago. But in the mid-19th century, my great, I think that's right, grandfather immigrated from Germany to Toledo and started farming, and then eventually started hothouse farming in greenhouses. By the time my grandfather was a boy, they had 7 acres under glass on Secor Road in Toledo, and during the Depression sold the hothouses, and my great-grandfather bought a farm just over the border into Michigan. So my uncles grew up cheering for University of Michigan. My grandfather always cheered for the Buckeyes. That was a little issue in the family, to say the least. I'm from Chicago. Before that, from Iowa. Grew up in a family that was highly Christian. Very, very religious. My great-grandfather on my mother's side actually was one of the first radio preachers in America. He went on the air at station WOW in Omaha, Nebraska in 1923, which was the year after radio was commercialized in the U.S., and he preached on the air every Sunday morning from 1923 until he died in 1963, at which point the radio show is the oldest, longest-running radio show in America. He also started he was a pastor of a big church in Omaha. He also started a missionary and Bible conference in Northwest Iowa that still meets today. It's the 82nd year that they're meeting this year. And so I grew up hearing stories of amazing things that people did for God. Amazing things that my great-grandparents did, amazing things that my grandparents did, amazing things that all these missionaries did. I have a great uncle who was the first white person that entered a whole area of Irian Jaya and brought news of God literally to cannibals that wanted to eat him. And so I heard these stories growing up, but I was not that kind of person. I did not want to go meet cannibals. I liked playing with puppets and watching Saturday morning cartoons. And so part of my quest in my life was always looking for what can I contribute? What do I have to contribute? Because everyone in my family was doing amazing things and was on the radio or up in front or speaking or at least leading the choir. They were all doing something for God, and I was so shy. Still am very introverted. After this, I'll go lie down. But I was playing with Legos. I was playing with G.I. Joes. I was playing with computers I also had an Atari, and an Atari computer, the first one they came out with in about 1980 when I was in high school. And I couldn't see how I could lead a good life how I could, have a really valuable life if I was too shy to go do all the great things that the people in my family looked up to. This led me to a dream. Have any of you ever had a dream? I don't know if you've noticed, but we Americans are obsessed with dreams. If it's first you think it's just for kids. Dreams are for kids because of Disney. When you wish upon a star, your dreams come true. A dream is the wish your heart makes. Hold on to your dreams. And you drive through the front door at Disney World and it says where dreams come true. This is it. This is the place, and it's for kids. But we're grown-ups, so we don't need that. Turn on the TV and watch almost any financial services company TV commercial. Your dream is out there. We'll help you find it. Your dream is out there. We'll help you insure it. and songs for grown-ups. Hold on tight to your dreams. As a whole culture, we're obsessed with dreams. Dreams are the fuel of America. Every country has a national bird or a national tree. We have a national dream, the American dream. So, I needed a dream too. But unlike a lot of people, my dream wasn't necessarily about, becoming rich or becoming famous or becoming wildly successful. My dream was about impact. I wanted to tell stories. I discovered fairly early on that I had some ability to tell stories. And I thought, if I could tell stories that make the world a better place, and in my family of origin, that really meant to tell people about God. If I could figure out a way to tell stories that tell people about God, then I would have a valuable life. At least my grandparents would think so, and maybe put me on the radio. As of September 2002, all of my dreams were coming true. VeggieTales is something that on paper makes no sense at all. It is a series of children's videos starring talking vegetables that love God. Try raising money with that pitch. It was created in a spare bedroom by a guy who got kicked out of Bible college after only 3 semesters for failing chapel. A guy who had no money, no connections, and no idea what he was getting himself into. And somehow, quite unexpectedly, it became not only the best-selling Christian direct-to-video series in history, but ultimately the best-selling direct-to-video series of any kind, with more than 60 million videos sold to date. But the VeggieTales phenomenon went far beyond just the sales of videos. Teenagers and college kids embraced Bob the Tomato and Larry the Cucumber. VeggieTales parties started sprouting up on college campuses. First at Christian colleges, as you might predict, but ultimately at places like Texas A&M and the University of Michigan. A CNN poll found VeggieTales among the top 10 most watched videos on college campuses nationwide. Larry the Cucumber t-shirts were cited at dance clubs in downtown Chicago. And perhaps most astonishingly, VeggieTales was directly parodied in a 2-minute animated spoof on Saturday Night Live and referenced by at least 4 different episodes of The Simpsons. VeggieTales was an enormous success. It was my dream come true. And it was a great story, too. Small town kid with nothing but a big idea, beats the odds and becomes a huge success. Changes the way we think about talking vegetables. The success of VeggieTales is a story that we like to hear. It's the story that the Wall Street Journal wanted to hear. It's the story that Time and Newsweek wanted to hear. It's the story that sent a photographer to our house for People magazine so that they could tell it. But it isn't the story I'm going to tell you today. I'm going to tell you a different story. And it isn't really a story about VeggieTales at all. It's about me. I grew up deep in the Christian community, as I said. My dad was the Sunday school superintendent of our local church in small town Iowa. My mother directed the choir. We were there. We were at church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, Wednesday night for prayer meetings, and they had kids clubs. We had potlucks and church picnics. If the church was unlocked, we were there. My great-grandfather started a Bible and missionary conference in northwest Iowa, and for the first 25 years of my life, I never missed a year. So if you grow up, like maybe some of you did, if you grow up in church every week, or even better, missionary and Bible conferences in small-town Iowa, there are certain Christian-y phrases that you hear over and over again that sort of stick with you. Phrases like this: only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. They're better when they rhyme. As a kid, I heard that phrase and thought, okay, if the only things that mattered are things that I do for Jesus, then that's what I'm going to do. I was kind of a rule-following kid. Other kids might have said, I'm going to go party. But no, I was like, okay, what do I do for Jesus? I heard the rhyme. Must follow rhyme. But there was another saying that I heard over and over again growing up as a kid in the church that stuck with me. You may have heard it too. God can't steer a parked car. Now, they may not have been technically from the Bible, but they kind of smelled like they were. So if the only things that mattered were the things that I did for Jesus, and if God really couldn't steer a parked car, well then I didn't want to be a parked car. I had to start doing stuff. I had to get busy. So I discovered at an early age I had an ability to tell stories. And I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do. That'll be my work for the kingdom of God and for churches, and it would make my grandparents proud of me. Maybe that's what I'll do. I made my first film when I was 8 years old, and by 14 I knew I was going to make movies someday. And that would be my work for the church. Well, I never made it to film school, and after 3 semesters of Bible college, my new friend Mike Naraki and I were both invited not to return because we had failed chapel. See, they had a puppet team. You had to do ministry. You had to do you had to sign up to go visit the homeless, or you had to go street witnessing on Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis, which is about the scariest thing to me, an introvert, that I could possibly imagine. Or you had to visit, old folks in old folks' homes. And I don't like to do things that involve strangers. Don't ask me why I'm here. I don't know. But I don't like to do things, my introversion, that involve, especially when I was young. And then I'm reading down this list. It's like, oh, come on. You have to pick one. You have to pick one or you won't graduate. Puppet ministry. They have puppets here? I've been playing with puppets since I was like 6 years old. So I went out for the puppet ministry and spent 3 semesters until I got kicked out, driving around rural Minnesota in a van with other guys with a box full of felt with eyes. Putting on really weird puppet shows and scaring the Baptists. It was fun. But we were also staying up late at night writing these bizarre scripts and then missing chapel the next morning, which is hence the failing chapel. And if you failed chapel 2 semesters in a row, you could not return the 3rd semester. Now they've changed that because I talk at a lot of chapels like Liberty University, Jerry Falwell's school. If you miss chapel at Liberty University, they fine you. See, they've turned it into a revenue stream. My school actually lost revenue by kicking me out. See, this is innovation. So I got kicked out of Bible college. I came back to Chicago and got a job in video production. After a few years, I'd managed not only to learn the world of video production, but also the brand new budding world of computer animation, which really caught my eye because I loved animation and I loved computers. And until I saw the movie Tron, I didn't realize they went together. And then I saw Tron and I thought, there's an overlap between my 2 favorite things. So I started learning about computer animation. And therein I found the tools to tell my stories, to make my contribution to the kingdom, to bring my dreams of impact to life. So in 1993, with money from friends and family and the help of just 2 other guys, I produced the first episode of VeggieTales, a rather odd little video starring talking vegetables that sang and danced and acted out Bible stories. We didn't sell very many copies. But the people who bought it really, really liked it. And they told their friends who really, really liked it. And they told their friends who really, really liked it. And before long, we'd sold 1 million videos. And then we sold 2 million. And then 3. And then 5. And then 10 million videos. And we started getting letters, as many as 400 a day, from fans as far away as Australia. Mostly from parents who wanted to tell us what an impact our work was having on the lives of their kids. This was great. God was using my efforts. Everything that I wanted to do was coming true. Lives were being touched. So I decided, if I could have this much impact just by making a few videos, think of the impact I could have if I built the next Disney. Of course, I realized that would make me the next Walt. I kind of liked the sound of that. Turns out so did a lot of other people. I met with artists from places like Disney and DreamWorks and Warner Brothers, and a lot of them were Christians, just based on statistics in America, and they saw me and thought, hey, he could be the next Walt, and even better than that, the Christian Walt. This could be all of our dreams come true. And so I hired them all and moved them to Chicago, Illinois, and set them to work on all the projects I'd put into motion. By the year 2000, we'd gone from 3 people to more than 200. We were the biggest animation studio in between the coasts. We'd just been named one of 10 studios to watch in worldwide animation by Animation Magazine, and I'd just been named in a PBS special one of 10 people to watch in worldwide religion. Pretty good for a Bible college dropout. Right about then, everything started to go wrong. The management team I'd put together to grow the company had done a wonderful job hiring a whole mess of people, but they were having trouble getting along with each other and getting along with me. We spent months arguing about business plans and growth strategies. And then, while we were busy arguing about how fast we were going to keep growing, we stopped growing. Sales completely stopped growing. And this was bad because many of the people I had hired from places like Burbank, California, and Orlando, Florida, back when Disney had a big studio down there, I could only afford if sales had continued to grow. In April of the year 2000, I realized that everything I had built was in very real danger of falling apart around me. I realized I had to do what I had promised myself I would never do. I had to let people go. From 210 to 180 to 140 down to 100. Every round of layoffs broke my heart. Every face that had come in beaming with enthusiasm, excited to be a part of something bigger than they were, walked out stained with disappointment, with tears for a dream that for them had ended way too soon. In the middle of that, we released our first feature film, Jonah, a VeggieTales movie. Came out in 2002. And though it was only supposed to do about this much at the box office, it was, after all, a small independent religious vegetable movie. Not a booming category. I thought, okay, if it does twice that many, then I could hire everybody back and keep this dream going. And God could do that, right? I mean, I learned since I was a kid that God can do anything, and that's a thing. So God could do that, and it was good for people, so surely He would do that. But He didn't. And then the home video came out, and I thought, okay, well, that's really where all the money is in a kid's movie. Even though it was only supposed to sell about that many DVDs, I thought if it sells twice that many, then I can hire everybody back and I can keep this going and keep my dream alive. And God could do that. But He didn't. And in the middle of that, a former distributor took us to court claiming we'd breached a verbal agreement. We knew we were in the right, but they didn't want to settle, so I had to spend 2.5 weeks in a federal courtroom in Dallas, Texas, wearing a suit and a tie, which for an artist is the 3rd level of hell. And as I sat in that courtroom, listening to the opposing lawyer paint me as a liar, all I could think was, okay, God, I think I can still hold this together. Keep this going. If you will just show up in this courtroom and show these jurors the truth in this situation. And He could have, but He didn't. The jury gave them everything they were asking for and more, $12 million in damages. And walking out of court that day, I knew that it was over. I knew that it was my 3rd strike. And I was out. I knew that my company, Big Idea Productions, would have no choice to go into bankruptcy. And that everything I had built in the prior 14 years, every character I had created, every story I had told, every song I had written would get boxed up and sold at a public auction to the highest bidder to pay as much of our debt as possible. It was right about then that a big Christian university called and asked if I would deliver their spring commencement address. And I had to say no. Because I didn't know what I would say, because I had no idea how God could just stand back from something that was doing so much good and watch it fall apart. And then I started to hear His whispers. Well, actually, they'd started about a year earlier when I got an email from a woman I've never met, whom I don't believe had ever met me. She thanked me for the work I was doing and congratulated me on my great success, but then closed by saying, but keep an eye on your pride. And I thought, that's kind of forward. I mean, we haven't even met. Who do you think you are? The emails kept coming every month, every other month. I'm glad things are going so well for you. Of course, by then they weren't, but she didn't know that. But keep an eye on your pride. Then, just before the court case went to trial, we had one last prayer meeting at Big Idea. They were quarterly affairs, all invited, none compelled, we said, because you can't make people pray in a company. It's against the law. The company was down to 65 people from 210, and only 13 showed up at the prayer meeting because folks were just so depressed. But the 13 of us prayed fervently for Big Idea. We prayed that God would save Big Idea Productions, that He would give Phil the wisdom to save Big Idea, to keep this dream alive. But there was one woman there who was the wife of one of our Disney artists who was an amazing prayer. Every prayer meeting, she was just, woo. The prayer meeting doesn't start until she starts praying. And she was silent during the whole prayer meeting. And as folks were leaving and it was all over, she came up to me and said, I think God has something for me to say to you. She said, I don't think this is about God and Big Idea Productions. I think this is about God and Phil. And before it's over, she said, I think you might have to say goodbye to all of us. I couldn't breathe. Don't tell me this isn't about Big Idea Productions. That's my dream. It's the work I'm doing for Jesus. It's everything. I didn't know what to do with that. Then God got tired of whispering and decided it was time to just speak plainly. I told you about my great-grandfather's Bible conference in Iowa. Well, by then I hadn't been in a few years because I got busy and there's no time for a Bible conference in Iowa. But my mother at that point was the director of the conference, and she came to me and said, you should really take a break and come on out to the conference. The speakers are going to be great. You should come on. And I almost did, and I thought, no, I'm going bankrupt, and that really takes it out of you. It does. You should try it. So she went and came back and handed me a cassette tape. Do you remember cassette tapes? They're like rectangular CDs. Yeah. Remember CDs? They were like tangible MP3s. She handed me a cassette tape and said, I think this is for you. It was a sermon preached by a pastor who was an old family friend, a guy named Richard Porter. And he started out by saying, what does it mean when God gives you a dream and the dream comes to life and He shows up in it and then without warning the dream dies? What does that mean? And I thought, okay, you have my attention. He went on to tell his story. At that time, he was the senior pastor of a large church outside Vancouver, and he had spent the prior 18 months trying to lead a revival movement in the greater Vancouver area. And the churches had come together, and they filled a whole sports stadium. They had a worship service, and they said that the God was moving, and people were excited, and they started planning the next one, and the next one, and the one after that. And he said he was sure any minute he was going to get a phone call from Christianity Today magazine saying, we hear there's something going on in Vancouver. Tell us all about it. And then without warning, 9/11 happened. And everyone got distracted, and the whole thing just fell apart. And he was so exhausted, so physically burnt out that he could not get out of bed. His doctors told him to take 12 months off. His elders from his church told him he could have 9. So day after day, he lay in bed, wrestling with this God that called him to do this good work, saying, if this is what it's like to work for you, I don't think I can do it anymore. In the middle of that dark time, he went to his daughter's church, and his daughter's pastor preached a sermon on the story of the Shunammite woman from 2 Kings chapter 4. How many people know the Shunammite? No. It is not a popular Bible story. No one has yet to decorate a baby nursery with the Shunammite woman. So, I will paraphrase it for you. The Shunammite, I can't even say it. That's how unpopular it is. The Shunammite woman was a wealthy woman in Israel. Every time Elisha came through the area, she would cook for him. Now, Elisha was a prophet. So he would swing by, and she would cook for him. Apparently, she was a good cook because he started swinging by a lot. So she goes to her husband and says, we should build a room on the roof for Elisha, which was not an insult. It was a compliment back then. So now Elisha could stop by, have a meal, and take a nap. What pastor wouldn't like that? Elisha was so appreciative that he calls her in one day and says, "You've been so kind to me. What can I do for you? What do you need?" And she says, "I have a home among my people. I don't need anything." But Elisha's servant comes to him and says, "Well, sir, her husband is very old and she has no son," which means in that culture, in that day, before long she would be destitute with no one to take care of her. Elisha calls her in and says, "A year from now you will hold a son." And you can see how much that dream means to her by her response. She says, "Don't lie to your servant." And she's not calling Elisha a liar. What she's really saying is, don't go there. Don't touch that. Don't even wake that dream up. Elisha says, "No, a year from now you will hold a son." Sure enough, a year later, she's holding a baby boy. And you can imagine how much she loves that son, because not only is he her son, but this is the promise that God has given her. This is the dream for her own well-being in her later years. And then one day as the boy's growing up, he goes to his father in the field and says, "Dad, my head hurts." Like most fathers, his father says, "Go see your mother." So the boy goes to the Shunammite woman, crawls in her lap, curls up, and dies. And there's the woman holding the dream God gave her dead in her arms. She takes the boy up to Elisha's room and lays him on Elisha's bed. And then she goes to find Elisha. He sees her coming in the distance and calls out, "Is everything all right? Is your husband all right? Is your son all right?" She says, "Everything's all right." But then she explains what's happened, and he says, "Okay, here, go back with my servant to your son. Take my staff and lay it on your boy." She says, "As surely as the Lord lives and you live, I will not leave you." So he says, "Okay, I'll come too." So Elisha comes back. He goes upstairs. He kneels and prays. And then, according to the story in 2 Kings, he lies down on top of the boy, nose to nose, hand to hand, foot to foot. And the boy sneezes 3 times and wakes up. And he brings him back downstairs and hands him back to the Shunammite woman. What is the point of that? I mean, what is she supposed to learn? The pastor that day said, if God has given you a dream, and the dream comes to life, and then without warning the dream dies, it may be that God wants to see what is more important to you, the dream or him. The Shunammite woman's response is clear. She goes straight to the man of God. She doesn't understand what's going on, but she's going to be as close to God as she can. When he says, "Go back with my servant to your son," she says, "As surely as the Lord lives and you live, I will stay with you." She doesn't understand the situation, but she's going to hang on to God no matter what. C.S. Lewis said, "He who has God plus many things has nothing more than he who has God alone." And I can understand that if I think about he who has God plus a brand new car has nothing more than he who has God alone. Or he who has God plus a big shiny house has nothing more than he who has God alone. Okay, sure, I can deal with that. But here's the deal. If God is infinite and infinitely capable of meeting our needs just all by himself, if there is something behind reality, capable of sustaining and creating all things, you can't add to infinite. Nothing plus God is more than God alone. So you have to put everything in that space. He who has God plus a warm, healthy marriage has nothing more than he who has God alone. Or the one that knocked me flat. He who has an amazing ministry reaching millions of children's lives around the world has nothing more than he who has God alone. So my friend Rick's conclusion, if God gives you a dream and the dream comes to life and God shows up in it and then suddenly without warning the dream dies, it may be that God wants to see what is more important to you, the dream or him. And once he's seen that, you may get back your dream or you may not. And you may live the rest of your life without it. But that'll be okay because you'll have God. Suddenly, I found myself facing a God I had never heard about growing up in Sunday school, a God who apparently wanted me to let go of my dreams. Why would God want us to let go of our dreams? Because anything you are unwilling to let go of is an idol, something other than God, occupying the place in your life reserved solely for God. Tim Keller's one of my favorite pastors out in Manhattan. And he says, an idol is a good thing that has become an ultimate thing. We tend to think of idols as, well, first of all, little golden things, and we don't have those anymore. So we're good. We're all good here. Or they're terrible things. You sacrificed your children to idols. That's terrible. It's a terrible thing. No. An idol is a good thing that becomes an ultimate thing, the only thing that you live for. And for me, my good work had become ultimate for me. Nothing was more important for me than doing my good work. Rather than finding my identity in my relationship with my Creator, I was finding my identity in my intense drive to do good work. But are we supposed to do good works? Well, sure. The Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Ephesus and said, "For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works." Well, there you go. Let's get busy. God can't steer a parked car. Wait a minute. Read the second half of the verse. Which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Oh, so God had in mind even before I was born the good work He wanted me to do. I don't have to frantically chase after it. I don't have to lose sleep at night worrying that I've missed it. I just have to listen. The problem with the saying God can't steer a parked car is that while it is cute, it is not biblical. When people of great faith in the Bible don't know what God wants them to do, they don't do anything. They wait on Him. This is an interesting concept, and it's really hard for Americans. What does it look like to wait on God? I have just recently learned how to do this. So what does it look like for me? Well, after Big Idea Productions fell apart and all the leftover pieces, including many of my friends, were swept up and moved to Nashville, Tennessee by the new owners, because supposedly that's where all the Christians live now, I spent some time hurting, just hurting. Then I started reading the Bible. I'd taken a small office a couple of blocks from my house outside Chicago, just for me, and every day I would walk to my office and spend the morning just reading the Bible and praying. No agenda. No video to write, no sermon to compose, just reading and praying. This went on for a few weeks. At first, I was very anxious to find the next big thing God wanted me to do, to find the next big idea. But after a few weeks, stretched into a few months, I noticed that I didn't care as much anymore. Eventually, it struck me that I no longer felt the need to write anything. I didn't need to have any impact at all. Whatever needs I had were being met by the scripture I was reading and by the life of prayer I was developing. My passion was shifting from impact to God. It took several months, but what I started to feel I can only describe as a sense of giving up, of dying, which scared me at first because I wasn't sure exactly what it is that was dying in me. And then one day it was clear. It was my ambition, my will. It was my hopes, my dreams, my life. There's a scene in C.S. Lewis' Voyage of the Dawn Treader involving a boy named Eustace, who is so prideful, selfish, and greedy that he wakes up one day to find that he has literally turned into a dragon. Life as a dragon proves so uncomfortable, and he's so lonely to be back with humans again that he longs to be human again. He longs to be back with his friends. And in this scene, Aslan the lion leads Eustace the dragon down to a pool of water. Eustace slides into the pool to cool his dragon skin and starts scratching at the skin, but can only dislodge a couple of scales. And then Aslan says, "Lie down, this is going to hurt." And with a long, terrible claw, Aslan digs deep into Eustace's skin, ripping it wide open. It is the most painful thing Eustace has ever experienced, but when it is over, he stands up, a boy again, reborn. God could have spared me from the pain of Big Idea Productions' collapse. He could have spared me from the consequences of my own mistakes and missteps. He had plenty of opportunities to do so, but he didn't. And it wasn't about God and my big idea. It was about God and me. My ambition, my dreams, my misplaced sense of identity and value were dragged kicking and screaming up onto the altar. And now they were dead, ripped apart like dragon skin. I realized this when I heard myself say to my wife one night, I don't want to write anything. I was ready to be done, if that's what God wanted, to just rest in Him and let everything else fall away. And then a week or two later, I woke up in the middle of the night with a story in my head, a story that practically wrote itself, a story that was so simple, so pure, and yet captured such a deep spiritual truth that the first time I read it to my wife, she cried. And I thought, oh, is this how it's going to work now? The next week, another idea came, and then another, and another. And before long, I had more ideas than I knew what to do with. Some ideas so small I could lose them in the cracks between the cushions on the couch, and others so big they took my breath away. But each idea was either derived from or confirmed during a time of waiting on God. Each one came without a hint of anxiety about what it should be, how far it should go, how many lives it should touch. If big idea felt at times like rolling a giant boulder up a hill, this felt like gliding on ice. Why is waiting on God, trusting Him, so vital? If I'm not waiting, if I can't be quiet, if I can't shut up and listen, I will never know what He wants me to do with my life because I'll just never hear His voice. I need to put my nose in His Word every day. I need to put my knees on the ground before Him in prayer every day. And I need to be quiet enough to hear His whispers, whether they come directly from Him or through emails from a woman I've never even met. If I'm so busy pedaling my little car that I cannot hear His directions, I am useless to Him. And even if I have His directions, if I let them become more important than my relationship with Him, I am useless to Him. So what's the point? What lessons should you learn from all of this? The first is simple. God loves you. Not because of what you can do, or even because of who you could become if you worked really, really hard. He just loves you because He made you just the way you are. In fact, and this was a tough one for me, He loves you even when you aren't doing anything at all. Secondly, when it is time to do something for God, and that time will come soon enough if you're listening, don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about the 10% more, the 30% less. That's His job. Don't worry about being the biggest or the best. Those words are irrelevant in God's economy. Your responsibility is simply to be available to do what He asks. And finally, and I'm very serious when I say this, beware your dreams, for dreams make dangerous friends. We all have them, longings for a better life, a happy marriage, world-changing work. But dreams are, I have come to believe, misplaced longings, false lovers. Why? Because God is enough, just God. And He isn't enough because He can make all your dreams come true. No, you're thinking of Santa or Merlin or Oprah. The God who created the universe is enough for us even without our dreams. This is the stunning reality that is so hard to comprehend in an American culture that has so much. God is enough for us even if we have nothing, without the better life, the happy marriage, the world-changing work. God was enough for the early Christians facing lions and fire. Even when the cavalry didn't show up and save the day, even when the lions and the fire won. And God is enough for you. In 2003, my dream died. And I discovered, once all the noise had faded away, what I had been missing all along. The impact that God put me on this earth to have does not occur when I'm pursuing impact. It occurs when I'm pursuing God. In the words of the psalmist from the Old Testament book of Psalms, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for the megachurch I hope to plant. So my soul pants for the million DVDs I hope to sell. No, not for the impact I could have, nor for the mega church I could build, nor for the mark I could make on the world, not for the happy wife, the healthy child, the meaningful work. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O God. Let it go, give it up, let it die. Let Christ shred your dragon skin and lead you to a whole new life, a good life filled with peace, joy, and love. Trust me, it's worth it. I got a few more minutes, so I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I started a new company after the collapse of Big Idea, and I wanted it to remind me of what I had learned. And so it's called Jellyfish Labs. And the reason it's called Jellyfish is jellyfish can't choose their own course. I don't know if any of you have studied jellyfish extensively as I have. They can't move laterally. A jellyfish can go squishy, squishy up. You can go squishy, squishy down, but they can't move laterally at all. So for a jellyfish to say in 5 years, I'm going to be over there, that's a crazy jellyfish. Because a jellyfish has to stay in the current and trust that the current will carry it where it needs to be. Now, because I'm American and raised in America, I have this vision of myself as a big studly barracuda. You know, like I can go anywhere, I can do anything. And even when I think about relating to my Creator, my initial response is, God bless me, and then stand back and watch. Okay, what I learned through my own experience of falling down rather dramatically and getting back up is I am not a big studly barracuda. I am closer to a brainless, spineless bag of goo. If I stay in the current of God's will and trust that His will carry me where He wants me to be, I will find the peace and joy that the Bible actually promises. When I'm chasing my will, 7 billion people chasing their own will is a great recipe for conflict. When I submit my will to God's will and live in community with other people that do the same, we find peace, joy, love, patience, kindness, long-suffering. The whole list of the fruit of the Spirit comes out of community and comes out of a community of people who are willing to pick up our cross. The verse where Jesus calls out to people and says, if you want to be my follower, you must pick up your cross and follow me. Interesting thing to say. My first thought as an American, not in the historical context, is, okay, I got my cross. Where are we going? I hope it's fun. Okay, if you lived in first century Palestine and someone said, pick up your cross and follow me, you knew where you were going. You were going to die. This is the weirdest invitation ever given by a public speaker to a large group of people. Come with me, we're all going to die. What he's saying is to follow me starts with dying to you. Until you can do that, you won't find the life that I made you for. I hate the fact that I had to go through what I had to go through and that I dragged 210 other people through it with me so I could learn that lesson. Sometimes you just have to learn it the hard way. But I'm hoping I can spare you a little of that anguish. Life under God, life with God, letting Him be the current that carries you along through life is the life you were made for. And it is a life that leads to peace and joy and love. Let me close in prayer. Lord, thank you for these people that have come to this great place, come together to learn more about you, to explore what the Bible is all about. And I would just pray that you would make yourself real to them, that your love, that your peace, that your joy is real and can be manifest in their lives. Give us the courage to let go of ourselves first. In your Son's name, amen.
Thank you, Phil. Take care. Well, we appreciate Phil being here today. And so two things. One, I know now that we have 4 services, many of us, we actually have groups of people who never get to see each other, and actually 2 different types of services nobody gets to see. So you got a little taste this morning or this evening of a little bit what our exploring service looks like, a different type of music, different type of experience. And so if you go, man, you know what, I got a friend. We didn't tell you Phil was coming because we didn't want to fill the church over the weekend with a bunch of other church people from other churches. But if you have a friend who you would say is not a church goer or somebody who doesn't attend another place, who's really a friend, and you'd say, this message that Phil gave about waiting, about dreams would be helpful to me. Phil's going to be delivering that same message all 3 services tomorrow. We did not have any room last week at our 10 o'clock service. So if you usually come to 2 services, please do not do that tomorrow unless you're bringing a friend. Or if you want to attend and hear this message again, please do it from the fireplace. We filled out the fireplace last week as well. So if you have a friend you feel like, would this be helpful, that experience, but it's not the praise and worship that I'm used to as we started the service, but boy, you know what, I can see how that idea of a dream and what our dreams are would be helpful to a friend of mine. That would be a way of thinking about, well, we have 2 services for a reason. We're trying to equip us when we come here in the Bible on Saturdays and Sundays at 8:50, but we're also trying to create experiences to talk about real life and how the Bible describes real life for friends who are maybe just kicking the tires. They're skeptical. They're just never thought the Bible could be relevant to life. So if you want to do that, Phil's going to be with us for the next 3 services tomorrow. If you're inviting a friend, please, 8:50 or 11 would be ideal, or you can come at the 10, and we're going to try and tell folks who come to 2 different services, please don't come in the door, because we want to make sure we're giving prime time to our guests, because we really want to honor them tomorrow. So thank you for being here. If you are interested more in Phil's story, I got to hear this story about 1.5 years ago. It was very impactful to me. It's also in the book that he has available out by the fireplace called Me, Myself, and Bob. So if you're interested in that, those are available out there. And if not, join us next week as we continue our journey into the book of Exodus, as we look again at how God is interacting in Moses' life when one of his dreams has died. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.